This is the true story of the Yuba County 5 friends who drove into the California mountains in 1978 and were found months later in places they should never have reached. On February 24, 1978, 5 young men from Yuba City, California, did what friends do. They piled into a car, a 1969 Mercury Montego, and drove north to Chico for a college basketball game. The 5 men, Gary Mathias, Jack Madruga, Jackie Hute, Ted Wyer, and Bill Sterling were all part of a day program for people with mild intellectual disabilities or psychiatric conditions. They were incredibly close, bound together by their shared love of sports and each other's company. That night was special. They were cheering on their favorite team, the UC Davis Aggies, who were playing against Chico State. Afterward, they had another game to look forward to, their own. Their team, the Gateway Gators, had a tournament the very next day, and winning it meant a free week-long trip to Los Angeles. They were excited, buzzing with anticipation. The game in Chico ended around 10 p.m. The 5 men left the stadium, stopped at a nearby market for snacks and drinks, and then vanished. They were supposed to drive south, back home to Yuba City. A simple, hour-long drive they knew well. But they never arrived. Their families waited, growing more frantic with every passing hour. By morning, it was clear something was terribly wrong. It would be 4 long days before any trace of them was found. On February 28th, a park ranger, deep in the Plumas National Forest, stumbled upon a familiar-looking car, the 1969 Mercury Montego. But its location was baffling. It wasn't south of Chico. It was northeast, nearly 70 miles in the wrong direction, high up in the Sierra Nevada mountains. The car was parked on a remote, winding dirt road at an elevation of over 4,500 feet, where the snowline began. The discovery only deepened the mystery. In fact, it had been driven carefully to its spot and parked. Investigators found it could still be started with a simple hot wire. The gas tank wasn't empty. Inside, candy wrappers, empty milk cartons, and soda bottles were strewn about, evidence of their stop after the game. But the car doors were unlocked, a window rolled down, and the keys were missing. Most importantly, there was no sign of the 5 men. Why would 5 men, eager to get home for their own basketball tournament, drive 70 miles the wrong way up a desolate mountain road, only to abandon a perfectly functional car and walk off into a freezing wilderness? A massive search operation was launched immediately, but the timing couldn't have been worse. A severe winter storm swept through the Sierra Nevada, dumping feet of snow and burying any potential tracks or clues. Helicopters were grounded. Search parties on foot and horseback struggled against blizzard conditions and sub-zero temperatures. For weeks, they found nothing. As winter dragged on, the official search was called off. The families were left in an agonizing limbo, clinging to hope but fearing the worst. Theories swirled. Did they get lost and panic? Did they encounter someone on the road, someone who forced them up into the mountains? The irrationality of their route made foul play seem like a plausible explanation. But with no evidence, it was all just speculation. The silence from the mountains was absolute. Months passed. On June 4th, nearly 4 months after the men disappeared, a group of motorcyclists discovered something chilling. 19.5 miles away from the abandoned car, they found a Forest Service trailer, a sort of remote outpost for workers. An autopsy would reveal he had survived for a shocking amount of time after the disappearance, likely between 8 and 13 weeks. He had lost nearly 100 pounds. His death was a slow, agonizing one, caused by starvation and hypothermia. His feet were badly frostbitten, but the most disturbing details were in the surroundings. Wyer was carefully wrapped in 8 blankets, as if someone had tried to keep him warm. And within his reach, in that very trailer, was a locker full of military C rations canned food, enough to sustain all 5 men for a year. There was also a propane tank connected to a heating system, but there was no sign it had ever been turned on. There were paperback books to read and matches to start a fire. Everything one would need to survive was right there. Yet, Ted Wire had starved to death. Why? The discovery of the trailer cracked the case open. Searchers now had a new area to focus on. Just 2 days later, they found the remains of Bill Sterling and Jack Madruga. Their bodies were scattered along the desolate dirt road, about halfway between the abandoned car and the trailer. It seemed they had never made it to the shelter. Madruga was still clutching the keys to the car. A day after that, just a quarter-mile from the trailer, searchers found the skeletal remains of Jackie Hoot. His father positively identified him by his jeans and a stray vertebrae. It appeared Jackie had made it close to the trailer, but collapsed just short of its relative safety. The body of the fifth man, Gary Mathias, was never found. Only his tennis shoes were discovered inside the trailer, suggesting he had been there with Ted Wire. Why he would leave the shelter, especially in his stocking feet, is a question that haunts investigators to this day. Some speculate he might have tried to hike for help, or perhaps, suffering from the disorienting effects of hypothermia, wandered off into the wilderness to his doom. The timeline of that night is a puzzle with missing pieces. The men were seen by a witness who worked the snowplows. He said he saw them around 2A, huddled around their car, and that a woman with a baby was with them in a red pickup truck. He warned them about the heavy snow ahead, but they seemed not to listen. This account was never fully substantiated and only added to the confusion. So what happened to the Yuba County Five? The official conclusion is that they died from exposure and starvation. There was no evidence of foul play. But this conclusion fails to answer the most fundamental question. Why? Why did they drive into the mountains in the first place? Away from their homes? Away from the tournament they were so excited about? Why abandon a working car? Why walk 20 miles through deep snow, uphill, further into the desolate wilderness, instead of downhill toward civilization? And perhaps the most chilling question of all, why did Ted Wire and Gary Mathias, after surviving for weeks in a trailer stocked with food and supplies, fail to use them to save themselves? Some experts point to a phenomenon called paradoxical undressing, a symptom of severe hypothermia where victims feel hot and irrationally remove their clothes. Others suggest a kind of group delusion or a cognitive cascade where one bad decision led to another under immense stress and fear. Perhaps Gary Mathias, who had a history of mental health issues, experienced an episode that the others followed. But these are just theories. We will likely never know the full story of what happened on that cold February night. The facts are documented. The bodies were found. But the truth remains elusive, lost somewhere in the silent, snow-covered peaks of the Sierra Nevada. 5 friends went to a basketball game and drove into a mystery that endures to this day, a haunting reminder of how quickly the ordinary can turn into the inexplicable.